I'd like him to disappear. I'd like to stop having contact with him. But at the same time, he tells me things like that. He is super depressed, that he has stopped eating, that he spends the days looking at the ceiling. He only thinks about killing himself and that he'd like to die. He doesn't tell me those things for threatening me, but it sounds a lot like that. He also tells me that the only light he sees in his days are the outings with me or the moments when I write to him. And so this thing, with the fact that I don't want to see him anymore because I can't stand him anymore, weighs over me. And I don't know how to disappear. I mean, I would strongly like to disappear from his life, but I feel guilty, 'cause I'm afraid he could hurt himself in some way.
We're in Italy, and this is a small extract of what Giulia Cecchettin said some time before she passed away by the hands of her ex-boyfriend. She was born on May 5th, 2001, in a small rural area between the provinces of Padua and Venice. She grew up in Viganovo, a town that is a few kilometers away from the schools that she attended in Saonara. She is the daughter of Gino Cecchettin and Monica Camerato. Unfortunately, Giulia faces her loss due to an illness in October 2022. She's Elena's younger sister and Davide's older sister. Her intelligence and versatility have emerged from the first school years. She graduated in 2020 with top grades at Liceo Classico Tito Livio of Padua, a prestigious institute also attended by the former President Giorgio Napolitano. When the time comes to choose the university, Giulia finds herself in front of a crossroad. She's passionate of art, but she's not convinced yet about the idea of turning it into a concrete career. So, despite her artistic skills, Giulia decides, in agreement with her parents, to undertake a more solid path and enrolled in the Faculty of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Padua. In the meantime, however, Giulia never abandons her passion for drawing, and after graduating, she has in mind to dedicate herself full-time into this passion. She attended the International School of Comics of Reggio Emilia in October 2022, ready to follow her dream. She has also other passions. She's a literature lover. She's a great fan of authors like Jane Austen, Virginia Woolf, Leopardi, and Dostoevsky. One of her teachers, Tiziana Tussio, often remembers her getting emotional during the readings of the poems of Emily Dickinson and Emily Bronte. Among her favorite books there is also Calando, a story that tells the love and life of an elderly man seen through the eyes of his wife, who takes care of him with devotion. Giulia was a mature and responsible girl. Her history and philosophy teacher, Barbara Giovanelli, remembers her as a young woman always ready to help others. She was the good girl of the family, a guardian angel for her sister Elena, with whom she shared secrets during the long walks in the park. Her care also extended to her father, Gino, with whom she had a very strong bond. Every night, Giulia was used to write him, "I love you," on WhatsApp while she was having her nights out. Her affection and sweet character were evident even in small things, like her passion for vintage things or for simple but meaningful gifts. During the years of university, she met Filippo Turetta, born in Padua on December 18, 2001, and raised in Torreglia. He was a classmate of her, with whom a romantic relationship lasted about 1 year. The relationship ended in August 2023. Filippo and Giulia had had a turbulent relationship, marked by episodes of possessiveness and jealousy on his part. Giulia had repeatedly expressed to her friends the fear she had towards Filippo, fearing that he could not accept the end of their relationship and how he had become insistent and threatening. This fear was justified by Filippo as a misunderstanding between the two. He presented himself as a person who never wanted to hurt her. Giulia, despite feeling trapped, uncomfortable, and tired of the continuous unwanted attentions, not wanting to hurt him, she wasn't feeling well at the thought of totally disappearing from his life. November 16th, 2023 was the date set for the discussion of her thesis, and Giulia, on November 11th around 17:15, sends an email to the university professor with the last version of her elaborated paper. Then, around 6 p.m., she left the house and met Filippo to go to the shopping center of Margara to buy a pair of shoes for the upcoming graduation ceremony. The two young people then had dinner at the fast food of the mall. Giulia was keeping in touch with her sister Elena until 22:43, when Giulia warns her sister she was coming back to Viganovo. After that, Elena received no other messages. Giulia doesn't come home that night, and her family starts to worry when they don't hear from her since hours. Worried, they try to get in touch with her, without getting a response. The father in particular begins to fear the worst, considering her absence as something more than a mere inattention. The next day, at about 1:30 p.m., Gino Cecchettin went to the police station to make an official report of her disappearance. Soon after, with the help of Elena Cecchettin, appeals were spread on social media to find the missing girl. After the appeal launched, an anonymous person contacted the family to inform them that he had witnessed a violent quarrel between a man and a woman the night before, around 23. The dispute took place in Via Aldo Moro in Viganovo, and the woman in question was asking for help, which is why the man had immediately contacted the carabinieri, who did not come to the place of the aggression.
Hello there. I call from Viganovo, and from the balcony of my house, I just witnessed a scene of a boy who was beating a girl, but they are leaving right now. And I saw the scene of this guy who was there on the ground kicking her. Then they got in the car. At this moment, they left.
After making the missing report, the investigators began the research for the missing girl, beginning to interrogate friends and family, trying to reconstruct the last moments spent by the girl, and began to focus on Filippo Turetta, who was the last one being seen with Giulia. The investigators examined several security footage of the areas surrounding the scene of the dispute and also of the surrounding municipalities, in an attempt to reconstruct the route of the car of Turetta, a large black Fiat Punto. Thanks to that, they were able to verify that he was moving from Veneto to Austria at the time of examination of the cameras. The car is captured by various video surveillance and traffic detection cameras. They also find one in which you clearly saw a man violently hitting a woman and then load her lifeless in the trunk of the car, in Fosso, bordering Viganovo. Immediately, the investigators go to the scene of the attack, finding considerable amounts of blood and the blade of a knife 21 centimeters long. This allows them to issue a European arrest warrant against Filippo Turetta on charges of kidnapping and murder. Subsequently, the research is concentrated in the area between Lake Barsis and Piancavallo in the province of Pordenone, an area detected by tracking the car of Turetta, which was taken at the entrance to the town of Piancavallo shortly after 3 a.m., to then being captured after 5 a.m. along the SR 251 at the Vagent Dam. And so, on November 18, 2023, a team of civil protection finds the body of Giulia lying in a rocky point in the forest, next to her various objects, including plastic bags and a children's book entitled, "Even Monsters Brush Their Teeth," that could belongs to her. It is revealed, following the investigation, that the girl had been hit by numerous stab wounds to the head and neck, dying of bleeding out. That same evening, Filippo Turetta was arrested in Germany, while he was stopped on the emergency lane of the A9 motorway between Bad Dürnberg and the junction for Rapactal, because he had run out of gas. He was taken to the prison of Halle, and then, on November 25th, extradited to Italy with a special Air Force flight landed in Venice. He was incarcerated at the Circo Dariel house in Verona, where he remains until the trial held in 2024. On December 1st, 2023, Filippo Turetta was interrogated for the first time in Verona prison. He admitted to having killed Giulia Cecchettin, but firmly denied premeditation. He spoke of an impulsive gesture, saying, "Something clicked inside me." Filippo tries to minimize, to make everything more innocent than it was, perhaps to make the meeting between the two seem less tense. Or maybe simply because admitting the truth would have made it all too real.
At one point, I just had the handle of the knife in my hand, so I don't know, somehow it must have broken, maybe. Maybe I hit her, maybe I hit the floor.
However, in the course of the investigation, law enforcement authorities found on his mobile phone an element that would have drastically changed the initial perspective: a list. A list that was written by Filippo himself on the 7th of November, 4 days before the murder. In that note, Turetta had noted disturbing words outlining a precise plan: knives, tape, a shovel, ropes, and socks to be used as a gag. Words that, one after the other, began to speak for themselves. A real document that refuted the image of impulsiveness. This, together with a map of possible escape routes indicated above, helped the prosecution on October 25, 2024, to challenge the aggravating factor of premeditation. So, that day, in front of the judge, Turetta admits to having planned the murder with precision, drawing up a detailed list of tools needed to commit the crime. Next, he tells what really happened that night. He says he wanted to spend time with Giulia before committing the gesture, then hit her with a knife in Via Aldo Moro. When she managed to escape and call for help, he claims to have followed her. He dropped her on the ground, kicked and dragged her into the trunk of his car, where he left her for hours. Finally, he went to an isolated place, where he ended her life, repeatedly hitting her.
I bought on Amazon a Scotch tape and a map of Italy. The tape is a thing that I must have put more thoughts on, so I remember it well. About the shovel, I have no idea. It could have been that I wrote it precisely to conceal the body. It could be, yes. It would have been better for me being together one more time, and then, obviously, after the act, it would have been harder to find us. But inevitably, anyway, we would have been found at some point. So the plan was to attack her, and then also, yes, take life from her and then mine.
The prosecutor pointed out that the murder was premeditated for days, with Turetta, who had persecuted Giulia even after the end of their relationship, fueling his resentment and desire for revenge. Thus, the Court of Assizes of Venice sentenced Turetta to life imprisonment, recognizing the aggravating factors of premeditation and brutality.
The Court of Assize of Venice, having regard to Articles 533, 535 CPP, declares Turetta Filippo responsible for the crimes he has been accused for, excluding the aggravators of having acted with cruelty and of having committed against the victim the offense referred to the Article 612 bis of the Criminal Code unified by the link of continuation, and sentence him to life imprisonment.
The aggravating factor of cruelty was not recognized in the judgment, a decision that has left many perplexed in Italy, considering the dynamics of the crime. So I would like to dwell on this aspect for a moment, in case you are also asking yourself the same questions. According to the interpretation of the judge, in order for cruelty to be legally defined in Italy, it is necessary that the offender acts with the specific intention of inflicting gratuitous suffering on the victim without wanting the victim to die. In the case of Filippo Turetta, the motive would not have been to make her suffer for the sake of doing so, but rather to stop her decision to move away, to regain her freedom. A distorted logic, of course, but that in the eyes of the law has made a difference in the definition of aggravating. This, of course, does not diminish in any way the horror of what happened, nor the pain that it generated. But it helps us to better understand how justice moves in the meanders of certain definitions, often difficult to accept on a human level. To better understand the nuances of this ruling, let's now listen to the words of the Italian criminologist Roberto Bruzzoni, who helps us to understand how this lack of definition does not affect the gravity of the fact.
For cruelty, there must be a separate time-related conduct as a purpose in relation to that murder. So, the brutality that is undisputed on this matter, as in many others, is not comparable to cruelty. It is not the number of shots that makes cruelty, but the presence of appropriate conduct, separate and unequivocally attributable to produce suffering that is not aimed at killing. That's what our code says. Let me give you an example, the configuration of cruelty as it could be seen. If I take a person, I already intend to kill it, but before killing it I submit it to cruelty. Not to kill it, but to make it suffer. There must be a clear separation between these two conditions.
Filippo Turetta has been described by experts as a fragile personality, with possible narcissistic and obsessive traits, as well as a marked affective dependence. The criminologist Roberta Bruzzoni spoke of a structural fragility of the ego, a personality that has not developed a stable and secure core, and that clings to the other to exist.
Well, here in short, what emerges from the descriptions, and especially from Giulia's sister, it emerges a profile called covert narcissistic personality. So an aggressive passive, one that is asphyxiating, surrounds you, basically besieges you and no longer leaves you any space of vitality and autonomy. Everything was with Giulia. The university, travel, hobbies, friendships of Giulia had become, let's say, even friends of him. His whole life revolved around controlling Giulia's life.
Narcissistic personality disorder, according to several studies, may develop in response to dysfunctional family dynamics during childhood. For example, a disabling family environment, with parents emotionally absent or, on the other hand, over-demanding. Both conditions can generate what is called a narcissistic wound, an inner fracture that causes the child to build an idealized image of himself to protect and reject his feelings of insecurity and shame. Over time, this leads to the formation of a false self, a grandiose mask, which serves to protect a deep sense of inadequacy and vulnerability. But living behind a mask makes it difficult to manage emotions and relationships. In this context, Giulia was an anchor for him, a constant source of confirmation. When he felt that she was going on with her life, with her graduation, dreams for the future, enrollment in the comic school, that fragile internal balance collapsed. Filippo could not stand the comparison with the value and independence of Giulia, because these elements reflected, in a merciless way, his own sense of emptiness. He was not simply a rejected boy, wounded or abandoned. No. He was a boy who could not accept that Giulia could live and shine, even without him. The pathological narcissist, when he loves, does not really love the other. He loves the self-image that he can see through that person. And when that figure is self-determined, it breaks free. It takes distance. What shatters is not the heart. It is the ego. Giulia was building her life. She was determined, sweet, bright. And him? He was stuck, trapped. That light, that strength, that autonomy, they became a cruel mirror for him, only able to send back all that he felt was not. The narcissist does not tolerate the happiness of others when he is not the author. He does not bear the value of the other if he exposes his fragility. And so, in his distorted mind, Giulia has become a threat. And a threat, in a deviated thought, has to be eliminated,